Ms. Jazinski, could we have a roll call for quorum?
Sure. Mr. Grippo?
Here.
Ms. Hallen?
Here.
Ms. Ham?
Here.
Ms. Harrigan?
Here.
Mr. Martelli?
Here.
Mr. Perugini?
Here.
Mr. White?
Here.
Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Carol. I ask that we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I assume, Jeff, you're going to show up the flag.
I will.
So let's rise for the pledge. I pledge of allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic
for which
for which
it
it stands,
stands,
one
one
nation,
nation, under God,
under God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
liberty,
with liberty and justice for all.
for all.
Yeah. Tim, your head's getting cut off. Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you to the board for attending this evening. Mr. Solon, Ms. Milano, Carol, Mike. There's a lot going on, so appreciate pulling the meeting together pretty quickly last couple of days, especially with the updates on reopening. Before we dive into the agenda, just want to apologize. We're a few minutes late. A few of us were in a prior non-meeting at the high school, of all places, and we had to beat Route 10 traffic to get back here in 10 minutes. So apologize if you all have been out there waiting. And Mike, when you get a chance during the meeting, if you don't mind texting or messaging how many people we have watching. Before jumping to the agenda, before we actually jump into superintendent's updates, do we have any correspondence or anything from the audience at this point, Jeff, to the COVID-19 email address?
We do. We have quite a few emails to cover about COVID-19.
Yeah, I was going to ask, we can certainly go through those now, or if you feel that the majority of those emails really corresponds to your update.
Yeah, there's really one that doesn't
Okay.
that I need to address.
Okay.
It's kind of tied together, but I want to address it kind of separately. It's from the Cheshire Change Coalition, which is exciting. It's a group of CPS graduates. Most of them graduated like between 2011 and 2016. And it's particularly exciting for me because most of them were students when I was a principal at Cheshire High School, or at the very least at Dodd before that. And they are committed to supporting the district's efforts to build on diversity, understanding of multiculturalism, and positive change, anti-biased, anti-racist curriculum. So today, as a matter of fact, unfortunately, I had a meeting come up at the 11th hour today, and I couldn't meet with them the way I had planned, and I'll get into that in a minute. But Kevin Hanlon met with them, our K-8 curriculum coordinator, and they had a few questions for the meeting that really fall within that domain of equity that I want to address outside of all the other COVID nuts and bolts. So what specific ways will reopening plans address racial and environmental disparities in underserved communities? I don't know that our plan necessarily addresses that in as much as it, the next two questions really speak to it. How will you account for working class families that may not be able to work from home or hire help to supervise children remote learning? Last spring, that was potentially an issue for people, but certainly mitigated by the fact that the vast majority of people were home. If we go to a remote learning environment, I think it will be, again, because the viral spread is so high that unfortunately we may be looking at that scenario again. But we'd have to go to, that would have to occur before we got to that point again. And I think this next one is, how does your plan specifically for support or assist families that may not be able to afford proper required technology for remote learning? And it's a good question. As you know, we provide a one-to-one device for every single student in the district at no charge. is part of their educational experience here. Last year, we made substantial efforts to reach out to families and provide hotspots and technology to those who may have needed it, or additional support to those who needed it. We had a student through a unique arrangement who was actually living in Bridgeport. We drove technology to their home. Like, we go above and beyond to make sure that everybody has access to learning, and that your economic conditions should not impact you here. And we definitely live by that. So those are good questions, and appreciate the group sending it in.
Thank you. And for the board members, what Jeff is referring to, Leo Arati is the spokesperson for the petition, and Cheshire Change.org has been great reaching out to us and looking to get something set with the board soon and have a discussion around equity and so forth. So we're going to work and try to plan that out. But you all have the email from Arati on this with the content behind it. Adam, you had a question?
I did. Dr. Solin's comment about the student in Bridgeport sort of set off something in my head. I know that in years past we've talked about the participation we have with the New Haven school system a lot of times. And do you think that, going forward, once COVID is passed, I know that you've always said that we have a kind of a high dropout rate, not a dropout rate, but the high school students tend not to attend Cheshire High anymore when they come from New Haven. And I would just like for you to consider, unless it's something you've done already, perhaps that those types of students could perhaps attend remotely. That could be some consideration for the future to allow them to continue to have access to our school system if they.
Yeah, I mean, thanks. It's a good point, Adam. Obviously, we'd love to have them in person, and I think that one of the challenges, just in my experience at both Dodd and Cheshire High School, has been that the older our kids get, the earlier they have to get up to take that ride, and that's really prohibitive. So it's another consideration as we move forward. But I appreciate you thinking about that and sharing, another strategy for us to make sure that they remain included in our schools.
Thank you. And I know the rest of the correspondence, at least what I've seen, is all related to school reopening ideas and concerns.
Yep.
There. So we're going to address those during the course of the superintendent's update. Also, remind those of you watching that you can submit questions, concerns, complaints, if you have some, to the CBS COVID-19 at cheshire.k12.ctus, and we'll get to those as we get through the superintendent's update. So that being said, Dr. Solon, we're in item 4, which is your superintendent's update.
Okay, so there are quite a few items, as Tony mentioned, related to COVID-19 and our reopening for the fall. So this week has been a little bit of a roller coaster, in the sense that on Monday, the governor announced plans to really allow districts more flexibility around planning for the fall, particularly around high school. And the rationale is that high schools, we're finding across the state, are very, very hard to integrate some of the mitigating interventions for the spread of the virus. So one of the things that we talk about is social distancing, a real challenge with bigger people. The data says, the older you are, the more likely you are to spread. So our 18-year-old bodies look a lot different than our 8-year-olds. So that's another consideration. Being able to cohort is near impossible without scrapping a tremendous number of classes and academic options, which is really not palatable for students that are trying to, gain admission to various colleges and universities. And so there are a number of factors. Lunch is a huge factor, given the size of schools. I work a lot with Meriden, Wallingford, and Southington. Southington's high school is 2,000 students. We have about 1,400 at Cheshire High School. Getting them through lunch in a socially distant manner, it would start with brunch at, 8 in the morning and run through 1 to be able to provide it within the space that we have. And these are problems that are not unique to Cheshire High School, but across Connecticut. And so the governor and commissioner at that time said, we really need to look at flexibility, particularly at the high school level. Tuesday, the commissioner was on a conference call with numerous members of boards of education from across Connecticut and reiterated that districts will have flexibility. Today, there was an emergency call. I got on at 3:00 and was told, well, we really haven't defined what flexibility means yet. And we don't really have a plan for, if what percentage of the community is COVID positive, do we go to hybrid versus remote? I know New York and Massachusetts both recently released their plans. So now it's back to that state of limbo. And evaluating this to a great degree, I really am concerned about at the high school level, our ability to mitigate risk and still deliver a high quality educational experience with all students all day. Clearly, that is my preference, to have all students attend all day, every day. I think that's everybody's preference. Our worst option is all students remote every day. And I'm worried that by not taking precautions, we're going to accelerate our transition to an all students remote every day situation. So at this point, I've asked Dr. Gadd and the team at Cheshire High School to examine various options for schedules if we were indeed to go to a hybrid model. One model we looked at had half the students coming in the AM, the other half in the PM. The benefit of that is that all students have contact every day. Some of the drawbacks are that it's a very short window, the periods. So in the morning, half the school would meet in 4 periods, in abbreviated periods. They'd all come in, get their instructional time, leave in the afternoon, grab their lunch or whatever. The other group would come in, and those students would go to the same 4 classes in just a different part of the alphabet. They teach the same 4 classes. Tomorrow you do the same thing with the other periods. Now, the cost associated with that is fairly astronomical. If we were to do this by alphabet, split the groups by alphabet, the cost for transportation alone would be about $5,000 a day. On top of that, we have a number of shared staff members between the middle school and high school, particularly with world languages, and they couldn't teach all the classes they teach. And unfortunately, they're languages that are hard to find quality certified people. So you talk about French, German, Latin, those classes would be really compromised. And I'd need to hire additional people to cover that schedule tweak. Alternatively, we've looked at having all students in every other day. So you have half of the group in day 1, the other half day 2, and they just alternate every other day. In that scenario, we really have very limited conflicts and there's zero change in cost. The benefit there is we expand out the period length, so students are in classes longer. We'd still divide up the periods. Students would have a little bit more time in the class during that day, but we call that the collegiate model, where students basically are attending their classes every other day. And so on their off days between their live instruction, they are engaging in the work that the teacher has assigned them for that day, as well as checking in with support staff during that day, to support their work the following day they come back to school. Very much like a collegiate model where the classes are a little bit longer in length, but not meeting every day. Either way, we would have to institute something for a short period of time. This is not a long-term solution. We would be looking at, doing this probably until early October, and then do we commit? How's it working? Do we commit to this for another period of time? Do we alternatively pursue a different option? But at the end of the day, this whole thing may be a moot point if indeed the governor says you don't have that flexibility, that all students must return based on the data that we have. So I just want you to know that that's what we're working on at this moment, how we're approaching it to try and, again, provide the best educational experience we can in a way that makes sure limits the risk of spread. I can never make sure. I mean, the only way we could do that is stay home. And even people who stay home aren't always great. I'm sure you have neighbors or friends that are out and about with no masks or whatever. But it's critically important at this time. We want all of our students to get back all day, every day. I encourage our community to wear a mask when they go out in public, to be vigilant about, not taking that mask off when you're in close proximity to others. And please, be smart if you're traveling to a hotspot area, because you need to. When you return, you need to quarantine. This is the best way that we can make sure our students are in school every day, if we can. And then we got to continue to do those good things that have been helping our limited spread. So with that, I just want to pause and give people the opportunity to ask any questions on that piece of it.
I have one that comes up in some of our communications we receive, which is the 8-foot, the 6-foot distance that in the presentation you gave last time asked about, 3 to 6 foot spaces between kids in our classrooms. State of Connecticut is saying 6 spaces. What is, if we were to go back to school and we can't keep kids in the classroom further apart than 3 feet, is Chesapeake giving us the green light to do that? Is SDE doing that? Like, who's gonna give us confirmation that 3 to 6 feet is allowed?
Sure.
If it's required.
Less than 3 feet is allowed. Actually, when you read the state guidance, it says that schools should, quote, maximize social distancing. They do not give any guidance as it relates to the distance apart that students should be. Now, the 3 feet and the 6 feet guidance, that's how far people need to be away from each other, at least to not be wearing masks, depending on your age and size. With a mask, and the reason we mandate the at least 2-ply mask, if not up to N95, is like a single layer bandana. The viral aerosol distance when people speak is about 3 feet on average. When people are wearing a 2-ply mask, it's 2.5 inches. So that's why we're being pretty rigid about the type of mask that people can wear, because it dramatically reduces the viral spread. I'm not saying it's safe to stand 3 inches apart if you have a mask. Obviously, we want to have the greatest distance we possibly can, but the state has given zero guidance in that respect. They've said just keep people as far apart as you can. So one of the things that we've explored, and I would talk about this in another part, but is tents outside our buildings to provide more space in rooms that may be more densely occupied, or rooms that you need to just get outside and take a mask break, and maybe the sun or the weather is not conducive to that. We want to have shelter outside for people to do that. Or if there's, a dining situation where we need to, get people outside for that, then it provides us more options, and we've tried to pursue those. But as you know, with the restaurants, tents are a little harder to come by these days. But we do have supply.
Thanks, Jeff. I asked some other questions, but let's get into the end. So basically, to recap the update so far on the governor's comments on the hybrid model, what you're saying is the focus is now, until we hear otherwise or get it confirmed, such that at least at the high school, we can entertain a hybrid model. But we're not necessarily entertaining that yet for the elementary school. Is that correct?
That's correct. Right now, the data doesn't support that, and we have mitigation strategies at those levels that we can't employ at the high school. Cohorting, as I said, is near impossible. At the middle school, where we initially thought we would be cohorting in groups of approximately 100, they've done a tremendous job to narrow that down to get it to closer to 25. So, that's a dramatic difference. And so with those conditions, we feel much better about being able to offer full day instruction, again, if the data stays the same as it is now. And that's the wild card variable in all this. We could plan hybrid, we could plan full day, and August 20th rolls around and the data explodes, and now you're all going remote anyway. So what we've tried to do is develop 3 quality models with the idea that we may very well be using all 3 at different points in this year.
Thanks, Jeff. Question from Adam and then Andrew.
Hi, Jeff. So just as a quick recap, so it's going to be, at least to start, assuming that the governor maintains the flexibility point of view that he had yesterday, and not necessarily today, but yesterday, that it would be full open for elementary and full open for the junior high, for the middle school. And then we may be looking at a hybrid situation for the high school, which looked to be an A-B day, which means that every other week, the days that you are on and off would alternate from a Monday to a Tuesday. Is that kind of what I'm thinking there, right? Because of the odd day? Okay, so it'd be so basically a 2-week period of time, the days would alternate in such a way that the high school student would be at school one day and then remote the second day, or was it like you're doing homework the second day? I didn't quite understand that.
It's more like doing homework, but we are pursuing check-ins for students through, first of all, special education is an obvious place where we would be looking at check-ins. We have math labs, writing labs, reading instruction. Those folks could do check-ins. And we are looking at, is there another way to connect more with students who may need that support? It does require students to be more self-directed. Unlike the remote model, though, where it was easier for a student to check out because they never had to check back in. Now you check back in, the next class, and that's where, there's more accountability in that respect.
And so it sounded like you're trying to make up the class hours by having longer classes during the days that they are there. Is that
right?
Okay, so like a collegiate model. Okay, like an hour 15 or
exactly,
an hour
like
and a half.
20 minutes left. That's part of why we call it the collegiate model. And I think we're trying to make some lemonade out of lemons here too. That we respect that the data says the vast majority of our students move on to 2 or 4 year universities. Not that all students have to or need to, but a number of students do. And so this is a brief period in their 4-year history, please God, where they are engaging in this form of learning. And we think it may be advantageous for them when they're through the high school to have had that experience with the additional supports that you would receive at Cheshire High School that you may not otherwise get at the collegiate level.
Could I ask one more question? If that's okay.
Fine with me.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Which one will I ask? Because I had 2. All right. Disinfecting. I guess so. Originally, you had a plan where it was like 2 days on, a day of rest, 2 days on, where there was a day where you were going to be basically scrubbing down the school for a day. And now it looks like the school will be occupied every day.
Correct.
So that there would be no disinfecting during the week, or would you be thinking that maybe there'd be some self-direction where there'd be spray bottles in the class and, okay, class, spray down your desk and then let's get class started? Or
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, sure. Let me clarify that. So when students leave the room, and again, this is since the other day, the data hasn't changed, right? Like, I mean, it's not dramatically different. It may have gone up a tick or down a tick. I can't even tell you that, but today, which is weird because usually I do know every day, but the data is still in a place where you might be able to argue that full day is a good idea. I think reasonable minds can differ. I am very concerned, however, that I do not want to be backsliding into a remote everyday situation. And we do know of other schools in Connecticut who probably will go all day, every day. And I would probably rather let them be the canary in the coal mine, to be frank with you, and allow us to transition back to this in a way that supports, again, provides that lemonade from the lemons, provides a unique opportunity for them to get that collegiate experience. In terms of the cleaning, any protocol that we have where kids are in school at the high school level, they will be asked to wipe down the desk after they're done. The student who follows them, if they have concerns, may wipe down the desk as well. We will have wipes in the room. The rooms will all be disinfected at the end of the day, every day. So that is still there. Yes, this is different than our hybrid model. That was the yellow model for the high school that we introduced initially. And I don't know yet, given the fact that this is 2 days that we've been exploring this, if the data means that we have to go to hybrid, we may go to that model, that yellow model that was in the plan. And I can't tell you that definitively today, but we would explore that.
Thanks.
Can I add one more piece to that just for clarity and to be thorough? So yes, there will be disinfecting every night, and there's also will be disinfecting of all bathrooms and all high-touch surfaces during the day at least one time. So we will have a crew that's disinfecting intraday at all the schools. So, we're going to be disinfecting on a pretty consistent basis, midday and every night, regardless of which model other than remote.
Thanks, Vincent. Andrew and then Faith.
Sure. Jeff, has there been any information that you've heard, or is there a date certain that we'll be able to draw the line in the sand and come out with a plan to send to all the district parents? Understanding that numbers change and it's kind of a moving target, but people are trying to desperately plan their lives starting in September. And sure, you're hearing this from other districts and other superintendents. I mean, at what point do we just say, these are our plans, send them out to the community and get moving?
Yeah, I think that's, a great source of frustration for superintendents, for parents, everybody alike. And our plan is by next Wednesday to have our principals send out basically a day in the life video of what life would look like for students, including, pictures or video of classrooms, things like that. In addition, at that point, we'll ask you to make a commitment one way or the other to in-person or remote, whatever the case may be, hybrid maybe at the high school. And then we'll have clearer data about where students are going. And what, the parent can then plan at that point. We can better plan at that point. It is frustrating to be a moving target, though, to hear that plans are changing and governor may or may not change them at this point. We were told 2 weeks before school he'll let us know. Well, 2 weeks before school is different all over Connecticut, depending on what your start day is. So I don't know what that means necessarily. So everybody's in a tough spot right now.
Okay, and one other thing, Vin, where are we with the install of the technology in the classrooms?
Well, they've been moving through the schools with the initial install of speakers. So I know Chapman, Highland, I think they were at Norton today. So it is progressing. You know, we are expecting it to be installed in time for school to start. And they've been moving at a pretty good clip. They're getting 5 or 6 classrooms done per day, but they do have to go back and install they're doing the microphones and the ceiling speakers first, and then they'll go back with the cameras and do the wiring and all the other components. So it's tracking, which is great to hear.
And how many classrooms district-wide for those listening?
56.
56 to 60. I mean,
There are
depending
56 classrooms, though.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Faith and then Adam.
Okay, so Jeff, I realize it's been a long time since Socrates and I were in college together, but as I remember, we had, our schedules were very defined, very limited courses, and I think of a high school schedule as being very diverse. So what is this going to do to electives if we go with this route? I mean, we have to concentrate on the course.
Yep.
And are we going to set up a hierarchy of courses, and how do we balance it? Because it's 6 hours max in a day.
Right.
And if we're,
that's a great question, Faith. And we are very much committed to providing a well-rounded educational experience, which, you know, core content areas are certainly important. We also feel like, you know, elective classes are equally important, and they could be really the reason that some kids come to school that day. Like, you know, maybe I'm so passionate about cooking that's why I get up to get to class that day. So we're not eliminating any classes in this model, and they're given equal time in the model. And I can show you a sense of the schedule. One version that we're considering here. You know, in that collegiate model, though day 1, A day, you'd have period 1, 2, 5, 6, B day 3, 4, 7, 8. So you still take every class in your schedule. The nice thing is that with half the students in the building, it allows us to limit, you know, attendance in Commons, CAF, and East Gym to be able to feed people from roughly 11:10 to 12:30 throughout the day, which is certainly a much more natural lunchtime than we'd have to consider otherwise. But it is really important to us that all students receive all classes next year. We don't want to, you know, that's part of why we're doing this, is to maintain a high quality educational experience. So that's what we're aspiring to.
could I follow up with one other thing? Just a thought. If we're going kind of the collegiate model, would it, actually, this could span the entire K-12 experience, perhaps a syllabus that outlines objectives. So when kids are off days, or, you know, if we're, God forbid, we're going remote again, either the kids or the parents know what the objectives are for the year for each student. Because then that way it could save the teachers, you know, just being harassed, and not harassed, but being peppered with questions day in and day out, if the parents know where those kids need to be at the end of the year.
Right. Well, we've definitely committed to Google Classroom as a anchor point, particularly at the high school level, for where our work will be focused. So it should be crystal clear what learning expectations are for students on a day-over-day basis. In terms of plotting out an entire year, the biggest challenge we have there is the bouncing back and forth between particular models. So if we're going to school as normal, the syllabus would probably look one way. If we're every other day, it probably is going to roll out even different than if we're remote. But, you know, I want to give Marlene the chance to chime in on this in terms of, you know, creating a syllabus for classes.
Hi, everyone. So very important points that you're making, Faith. I think part of that information is communicated at open house. And those open houses will happen even if they don't happen in person, they'll happen virtually. And there's quite a bit of information that's given out to parents at that time. When you think about a classroom teacher, this is what we're covering. These are the expectations for this year in grade 3 math and in reading, et cetera. And then when we have those parent conferences, again, those are revisited for the half year along with, you know, progress reports all the way through. So we have a couple of places at each level where that is done. In addition, there are links and things that we send to parents so that they can clearly see curriculum-wise what we are covering for the year. And certainly we're monitoring and adjusting that based on last year and this year as well.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
Let's see, we have Adam and then Tim.
Me and Tim back to back. There should be a flurry of questions. I have 3. I don't know. You can cut me off at any time, Tony. Firstly, as we've seen with professional athletics, at least certainly with baseball, where their model is traveling, where the other sports so far are going to be in a bubble. And we still haven't seen how that's going to be, but it looks like testing has been successful there. Is there a possibility now, or at least where we've seen where one athlete could take down an entire team in the locker room? Has there been any discussion with the CIAC about postponing or canceling fall sports or athletics in general for the year? And if so, I know that's been one of the major talking points as far as starting times go, as far as school start times. If athletics were eliminated, would a later start time be considered, since there wouldn't be that need to coordinate with other athletic events and schedules that would normally start after 3 o'clock? So that's question number 1.
That's a 2-part question, Adam. But anyway.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I get to this.
First part of that is the CIAC has not yet made a decision on athletics for the fall. They've been very deliberate in their rollout. To my knowledge, there have not been positive cases associated with high school athletics, to my knowledge. But I'm not familiar with every athletic program across the state, but I've not heard of any. The other part of that, if fall sports are canceled, the challenge in changing our school start times would be transportation, if we're providing transportation to all schools. So right now, the runs are cascaded one on top of the other. So if I backed up the high school, I would need a lot more buses to run DOT at the same time, which we haven't budgeted. And given the budget overruns we'll have through COVID this year, I wouldn't necessarily recommend pursuing that option. Although, you know, I do think there's benefit to a later school start. This isn't the time to try and tackle that, I'm afraid.
Thank you, Jeff.
Sure.
Let's see. Secondly, so with the hybrid model for the high school and then with full open for the other levels, is the opt-out still a consideration at the high school level? A full
Absolutely.
opt-out?
Yeah, the opt to remote learning is a consideration at every level, no matter what we do. So if we're, you know, all in or hybrid, then you can opt to go remote. If we all go remote, then obviously you're remote already. And the last option would be to withdraw from school completely and homeschool, or private school, I guess you could pursue. But
Okay.
they're all kind of in the same boat we are.
And finally, with the hybrid model, and I guess, well, with all the levels, has there been any commentary from the teachers about their feelings on a full open and or hybrid model?
It does run the spectrum. I will say, you know, there's anxiety among some at all levels. There's, you know, a desire to get back from everybody, but different people have different concerns. This week I've met with about 75 teachers so far in meetings throughout the day. So what we try and do is talk about, here's providing more clarity around what the plans are, and then talk about what concerns or suggestions do you have. So for example, yesterday a concern was raised about a unique educational environment within the district that, all right, that's a unique challenge. Vin met with those teachers, with special ed supervisor today, Robin and Carey, and they tried to brainstorm about how to solve that. So we've encouraged a lot of dialogue between our teachers and our administrators, and we try and collaboratively solve problems. Everybody wants to be in school. Everybody wants it to be safe. How do we work through that is definitely a real challenge. But our teachers have been really good about it.
Thank you.
Tim.
Thank you, Tony. Yeah, so I've got a few different questions, but I think they should be quick answers. That's my hope. Adam asked a minute ago about the CIAC. Is that a state agency, a quasi-state agency?
It's not a state agency. It's an organization that, it's like the NCAA. That's not a national organization that is overseen by anybody. It's more or less a body that all of our many across the state belong to in order to participate in sanctioned state championships and things like that. They don't have any official authority other than to say that they're gonna cancel championships or whatever. But because it's comprised of athletic people from all over the state, I mean, it's self-governing, if you will.
Okay, but they don't take direction from the state necessarily. They'll
They
probably follow guidance, but
They
it's
don't.
not.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Number two, second question. Marlene had mentioned the open houses.
Yeah.
And so one thing that I've heard from some of my friends who are teachers is they've said, and this is not just in Cheshire, this is in the area, where they've said to me bluntly, you know, the remote learning didn't work as well as in classroom learning. And so they're expecting, whereas in a normal year, they probably take a few days or a week to sort of gauge where students are and sort of catch up on stuff. They're thinking it probably will take a little bit longer this year to do that. And so my question is simply in relation to open houses and the timing of them. Typically, I think they happen within the first week or two of the year. Do you believe that, we don't even know when school will open necessarily right now, at least at this second in time.
Right.
Is the idea to have the open houses occur after teachers are comfortable that they've gauged their students and where they are?
No, not necessarily, because we have two different, I think, objectives. One with open houses is really to provide a more generic overview. Marlene was talking about using that time to highlight what it is that we're focused on learning, the expectations of classes, things like that. Now, a teacher conference is different. That's where we're talking more about individual student needs. We anticipate at this point in time, I think it's a pretty safe bet that we're going to be doing all of these things remotely. And so, yeah, the generic overview is more that open house, and then the parent conference that gets into more of what you're talking about. We haven't considered pushing that back yet, but that's later in the year anyway, toward October.
Okay, yeah, parent-teacher conferences. Okay.
Yep.
We're getting 56 classrooms are getting the cameras.
Correct.
How many classrooms do we have in CPS?
Several hundred.
Okay.
More than 300.
Okay. All right.
Vin, do you have a count on that?
Yeah, it doesn't need to be specific. I was guessing
More
somewhere
than
around
300.
It's 300 and 400 if you count every learning space. That includes libraries and other areas.
Okay. So we're getting to maybe 20%, 15 to 20%, depending on how you count it. Okay.
Yep.
And with regarding elementary schools and the cohorting goal, it sounds like you're talking about moving toward a full reopen for elementary schools. It seems that makes total sense to me in terms of the ability to cohort. But I'm just wondering, in terms of the non-standard classroom stuff, so lunch, specials, that being library, art, music. Is there an idea on that? Would those teachers be going into the classrooms with each of the students? Would they be canceled? I have no interest.
Yeah, Marlene, you want to talk about that?
Sure, Tim. Great question. I'm glad you asked it. A couple of things. I believe, and I don't have the exact statistics for every single school building, but when last I talked with the principals on this topic, it sounded as though most of the schools were going to be able to provide art, music, library, PE in their original spaces. When that is not possible, those specials teachers will go to the classroom to provide that. So each of the school principals will be putting together that day in the life, or like that one pager of what recess will look like, what specials will look like, where will they have those, where will they have lunch, and what will that look like. So they're busy working on all of that to send out to principals, along with a video to kind of show what the spaces look like.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. Just for a little change of order, how about Faith and then Adam?
Sorry, Adam. Okay, just real fast, and to follow up on Tim's question. All right, so we have 300 rooms. We're obviously not going to win the lotto tomorrow. So what is a good number? We have 56. That's clearly inadequate. What's the goal, and how do we get there?
Well, first I just want to be clear that this is so unique in that we don't know what sort of environment we're going to end up in. I mean, if we were to go to remote learning tomorrow because the data said we had to, and we don't return to full-time until we get full-time instruction, everybody's back for 3 months or 4 months or something, let's say worst case scenario, we just wasted a boatload of money on PPE. And our goal has been to be very conscientious about the money that we're spending, and be very judicious in how we make these decisions, with the best case scenario being that we purchase something to cover us in COVID that has residual value after COVID. As a matter of fact, in the case of the audio systems and the technology in the room, it doesn't just have residual value, it has an enhancement after the fact, which is why we've been more eager to pursue that intervention than other options, for example. So yes, we have 56 classrooms. We would love to do more. To do another 30 would cost approximately $100,000. And as situations evolve, I right now, the company, R&B Enterprises, is doing for us exactly what they can with the materials they have available, what we've committed to them financially. They're working as quickly as they can to get these things in the room for the start of school. It's going to take them a month to really do all of these spaces we have. In that time, I think we should know more about the data and where we are. And I don't want to just run out and spend the money because we can. And I know that's not what you're suggesting, but by the time they get to the end of the installation process, we'll know more to be able to move forward on more. I'm thinking that, based on the current trajectory, I I think 30 more would be a responsible number to cover. Highland is a very big school. Right now, they only have one in every classroom, or one in every grade level, excuse me. I think they could certainly benefit from more. Dodd and the high school could also benefit from more. If we're going hybrid, if we're committing to a hybrid model, we'll know that in a few weeks. And what does that mean at the high school in terms of the remotes? Do we need? So I think waiting a few weeks is prudent here, but in the projection, we're looking at about 30 at the cost of $100,000. And then we'll talk about that as we get closer to the opening of schools.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Thanks, Faith. Jeff, I want to do just a quick recap and then one last question. So when we started the meeting, Michael posted around 6:35. We had 83 viewers. As of 7:16, that jumped up to 221, which is great. And I think that goes back to the obvious interest in the reopening, which, no doubt it's a big deal for us and parents and all stakeholders. But also going back to what Andrew said earlier, about having a final plan published. So for folks just tuning in, a quick recap is Jeff gave an update on the recent changes, or at least communication that came from the governor's office literally Monday, that a hybrid model is being considered for the high school, specifically due to space limitations. So Dr. Solon did walk us through that, what that would look like in terms of A days, B days. I won't rehash it. So, but that only applies to the high school, and we're still waiting official confirmation from the State Department of Education that that will be an option we can pursue. And the reason I bring it up is we understand that, and even from here at other boards, that a lot of boards have been preparing hybrid models in the hopes that that will be a go-to model, but that has not been made official yet. And so we're hopeful that will be. But right now, I just want to recap, it only seems to be for the high school it's being considered. As far as for the rest of the schools, Jeff, it's still the option of going back full-time, synchronous or asynchronous learning. That's still open to all the schools, actually. So that has not changed. So the question I have around that regard is, will you be sending out a survey soon to poll the parents again on, I guess similar to the last one, maybe a little bit more detail around the options that to consider, and see if the percentages have changed at all since this information?
Yeah. So our plan is by next Wednesday, we've asked principals to put together that video that I was talking about, where kind of go through a day in the life of a student, so that our parents have a better sense of exactly what our kids will experience or their children will experience. And with that video will be the survey, and we'll give you our plan right now is to send that out Wednesday and ask people to commit by Sunday night whether they're going to pursue the plan for that building or they're going to choose remote.
Got it.
And that, that'll give us better data and better ability to plan.
Thank you. And we've had some parents and other stakeholders, I think you got the emails to offer their assistance in helping draft the next survey, to get a little more detail around this. So if we need anything at our pulse, probably one or two more, I guess, as things change. But with regards to the 56 classrooms being set up with the audio and video, is it safe for me to assume that the classrooms being targeted are, or the grades, just to say, are those grades or classrooms where the space is constrained for a full class for the social distancing guidelines, therefore those are the best candidates for the remote learning to help?
Right. Not necessarily. The rooms within a grade level, within a school, are generally pretty much the same size. So what we've done is, work with teachers to identify volunteers and those that are a little bit more tech forward to facilitate. Again, this is very intuitive technology. You don't need to be Bill Gates to figure this stuff out, but we work with the teachers to identify appropriate folks. And our goal would be to try and assign more students who are remote learning to those teachers.
Got it. Would it, be helpful if I know I asked last week, I know Vincent's working on this, but at least for the board to see all the classrooms, square footage, how many kids will be in there, just so I have an idea.
Right.
You know, is 3 feet gonna be too close in some cases, 6 feet? And I'm wondering if it'd be helpful for parents to see that maybe if their child is gonna be in a classroom where they feel, well, yeah, they're all the same size, but if my son or daughter has 30 kids in a classroom, they may feel comfortable making a decision knowing that to keep them at home and do synchronous.
Right. Right.
I don't know what level of detail, but it might be helpful, and that might be answered when you start doing the walkthroughs of the classrooms. I know you talked earlier, Marlene talked earlier about the videos from the principals that will be going to the parents soon, walking them through the day in life for a student, just so they get a visual of what it looks like. I think that's something some parents will want to say, got it, but I don't feel that comfortable. I know I have to send them in, but I'm going to start off at home at first and see how it goes. But but the point is, there's options for all the parents still. We haven't taken anything off the table.
Yeah.
Other than is now in a hybrid option at the high school. We're trying to get confirmation on that. And lastly, just want to recap: you're not advocating the board spend $900,000 to retrofit all the classrooms with technology at this point. Just in case folks tuned in and didn't hear that. I think that's prudent, and I think we discussed at the last meeting that at the early grade levels, we don't know how effective it's going to be. So as things change and evolve, you'll bring to the board recommendations whether or not the 30 or 40 or 50 required,
Right.
versus spending all the money right now.
Right.
And it turns out we're full remote learning and we have technology sitting in the classrooms unused.
Right.
So,
I mean, yeah, as much as it would be a benefit to have all the rooms outfitted, I realize that our resources are finite. They're not absolutely unlimited. And even if we wrote a check tomorrow for $1 million for this company to do every room, they couldn't do it over the course of even, the next 6 months, probably, just because of availability of materials, the rooms being used, they can't get in there, stuff like that. They couldn't even actually facilitate that. The other reality is that these systems take some bandwidth. When we're running Google Meet across a big part of the district, it eats up bandwidth. And I would be afraid that if we went to every room, we would crash the system if we had that many people accessing it at home. So, there are a lot of considerations in this. And that's what's made the summer really challenging, is we're just talking in such detail about the tech. We think we have to go to this level of minutia for lunch, for kids walking in hallways, for bathrooms, for transportation, for staffing, it's just outrageous. And that's why if we could get a clear destination of what we're allowed to do, it'd make life a little bit easier.
Yeah, one last thing, and I know you have more to talk about. Two things. You accidentally slipped the name of the company doing the technology install. So I know my fellow board of chairs will be probably calling them to get their hands on whatever.
We got a lot of inquiries.
But it is hard to come by. Number two, though, what about costs? You alluded earlier to the fact that we are going to overspend on some things. Do we have an idea yet? And I'm assuming that the 56 classrooms, that money, is it being paid for out of the $200,000 set aside? Where are we? Where do you project us to be in quote unquote going over budget as things stand right now? And what could the potential be if you have your crystal ball down the road for that cost? I'm asking only because at some point, I know we're doing the best to absorb what we can in our budget, but at some point we would like to get in front of town council, town manager, town financial planner, give an update on where we're actually going to be with your opening, and if we need help, if any, I don't know.
Yeah.
Give a heads up that there might be some things discussed during the course of the year as far as our expenditures. Just to have an idea, they can question and maybe plan for. I'm not saying we're there. I assume we're going to have something to deal with.
That's another great question that we ask ourselves every day about, like, oh my God, what is this going to cost us? And we are very sensitive to that. We're not, shorting things. We're not shorting safety because we're worried about the money, but we think about the money and when do we ultimately have to go back to the town and what is that going to mean? So right now, I think, the short story is that we're too early to absolutely know. Like I said, if we went to remote and we weren't using any PPE, we don't have to keep buying it. But I'm going to ask, I would expect that a few weeks from now, as we get close to the start of school, we'll keep buying the things that we need to ensure public safety and educational, progress within reason. And if it's a massive, like we wouldn't pull the trigger on a, 30 more cameras without talking to the board, but we're going to continue to purchase PPE and the things we need to open school safely and move progress of education. But I'm going to ask Vin to talk about where those areas are from tents to PPE that we're focused on. We may not even be able to give you clear numbers on each of these areas right now, but you can get at least a sense of what we're doing.
Thanks.
All right. Good evening, everyone, again. I'm just sharing my screen really to identify, these are the pressure points that we're going to be watching closely in the budget. So this message that you see on the screen is, this was a message that we spoke to the administrators about at our meeting this morning. But, the budget, obviously, we're asking for extreme caution this year. We do have a 40% expenditure cap in place until further notice. So, all the principals with the accounts that they have responsibility for, all the department managers that have budget responsibilities cannot exceed 40% of their approved budget. Again, that's the way we typically manage the budget. Normally at this time of the year, we allow 60%. We're at 40%. Those bullets identify those areas that we're going to be managing against. And as Jeff was alluding to, there's some variability, like cost of, right now, we're in the middle of looking at what furniture needs to be removed from all the classrooms and whether we're disposing of it, moving it into storage, and then we'll have to move it back. So the longer that the items stay in storage, the more it costs. And we have a vendor that's going to do this for us. The second bullet is the item I mentioned earlier. We're going to be disinfecting, sanitizing, and cleaning the buildings intraday. We're hiring a vendor to do that. So if that only goes for a month, it's a lot less than it goes for 10 months. And the advantage of using a vendor to do this is we're not hiring and adding staff. We're going to have a vendor who, if we don't need the service anymore, we can discontinue it with, just a week's notice, really. Purchase of things like the PPE, sanitizing wipes, paper towels, sanitizing and cleaning products, all going to be a variable cost. The longer we need to continue to buy those items, the more it costs. Additional staff, we're being really careful not to add staff, but we know that we're going to have to add staff hours. Simple example, if we add a lunch wave at an elementary school, we have to bring in our teaching assistants, the lunchroom playground aides earlier. The food service staff would have to come in earlier or possibly stay later, depending on the schedule. Student transportation, we do have a budget for that. But as Jeff mentioned earlier, if we go to a different schedule at the high school where we have an AM and PM, all students in the building, that's going to cost us, as much as $5,000 per day or as little as $2,400 per day for the period of time in which we do that. And the $2,400 is simply 1 hour of overtime per bus, which is $100 times the 24 buses we'll need to meet that schedule. We talked about the classroom broadcast capability. That's about $200,000. The last bullet is the tents that Jeff mentioned. So if we install tents at the schools, there'll be a cost associated with that, and it varies. It's a monthly cost. So the longer we keep it, the more it costs. And the last item which is the one bullet up from the last, really is not related to COVID, but it is something that is breaking news that our transition students normally, we would provide services until age 21. There was a court ruling that requires us to provide services now for those students to age 22. So I don't have a number as to what that would be yet. Tracy Nolan Hussey, our Director of Pupil Personnel, is looking at that. But those are the categories that, you know, have the biggest potential for variances to our budget. And, you know, I was reluctant, you know, Jeff and I spoke earlier, to put any numbers to that are definitive yet, because I don't know what they are until we know what period that they'll extend to yet. We are in the first budget month of the year, which hasn't closed out yet, but obviously I will be providing finance updates as we progress here. So I hope that at least answers the question kind of at a high level, and we'll keep narrowing down the numbers as we go forward.
Thanks, Vincent. Jeff, I'm sorry, let me turn it back to you. I'm not sure if there's some more emails that came in or if you want to go on with your update. I know there's more to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely wanted Vin to be able to give that financial update, you know, as the next item on the agenda, and then to address the myriad of COVID related emails. And I will tell you, you know, there's a solid stack of them, and some of the questions that are asked are, you know, brief enough that I can kind of give a quick shout out on. Some of them that have come in the last half hour are so long that I couldn't even read them to respond yet in this forum, this sort of forum, without people just sitting there staring at the screen for a long time. So I'll just try and crank through these questions and summarize them. We're concerned about teachers' ability to serve both in-person and remote students equally. What happens also if the student or if the teacher becomes ill, excuse me, and we have to go to a substitute. So Marlene, you want to talk about how much we've been focusing on consistency between classes this summer?
Yes, we've been doing a lot of work with that, especially knowing that in the remote environment, we always want to make sure that kids get the same experience. Obviously, that's going to vary based on things like teacher personality and how they choose to teach a certain standard. However, the material that they learn and the content that they are asked to master will be the same. We actually have a number of teachers going to conference workshop next week, 3 days, 2 hours apiece, that a number of us will be attending so that we can provide some professional development also to all of our teachers around this idea of, again, you've heard me say this before, meeting students where they are, regardless of the fact that we've just experienced COVID. And this is a practice that we want to employ all of the time, not just during this pandemic. So there's been a lot happening behind the scenes as far as teaching and learning and instructional practices that we'll be utilizing during that time.
Thank you. I also want to just indicate to people that are watching at home that on our website, right on the front page, it says frequently asked questions. So, you know, if you were to go to our homepage, the Cheshire Public Schools website, and show you quickly here how easy that is. This is our website right here. It has our school reopening plan, and then frequently asked questions below that, because many of the questions I get are available here in the FAQ section, and we do update this as things change. So this is a great resource for people to access if you have a question and just kind of want a quick answer on that. Next question is about if we have to go to a cohort, or excuse me, a hybrid model where half the students are attending one day and half the other, will you be conscious of siblings? And the answer is yes. We'll do the best we can, easily within a building, but also try and look at that across different buildings, different grade levels. If with the current hybrid model, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, what will happen with many school holidays that fall on Monday? That was an example in our hybrid model. So when we identify what cohort students are in, we would identify the school schedule around that, because we wouldn't want the cohort who always has school on Monday to always be gypped. If numbers still stay low, will there be a time place to move to a full 5-day-a-week school? And the answer is probably. The state, like I said earlier, New York and Massachusetts have both released guidance around that. Connecticut about 2 weeks ago indicated they would, but we haven't seen that yet. What percentage of students or parents are take 3? It's been a long day. What percentage of teachers do not want to return to school? What will happen if our teachers refuse to return to school? First of all of our teachers want to return to school. They want to do so safely, though. And so that's really what we're focusing our energy on, is to try and make sure that that's safe. We've asked teachers that have medical conditions to notify our HR department, and Vin and his team are working through those things, and I'm working through those with the union. We're meeting actually next week to review some of those. If you just don't want to return because you just don't want to, that's not really an option. Obviously, if there's not a health issue or anything, you just don't feel like it, or you're concerned, but there's no medical, we try and address it if there's a concern. How can we help mitigate that concern? But otherwise, you really have to report to work. With a hybrid model, teachers and staff will be instructing 2 days for 2 days and remotely for 3 days. That's not necessarily accurate. I just want to make sure people understand in the hybrid model, the teachers are teaching in person 4 days, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, for example, during the week. Wednesday would be a day that everybody's home doing remote. But in that model, the teachers there all 4 days doing live instruction, and the students at home. Again, this would be an area where we would really want more of those camera setups. It would really help on a broader scale to be able to do that at that point. But I still think it's prudent to have a wait and see approach at the moment. Have we thought about possibly extending days to ensure adequate drop-off time? Not necessarily extending days, but we're working with the Cheshire Police Department to set up more efficient drop-off situations for students on buses and who get driven to school. As you know, that's already a huge issue in our buildings, and we're looking at alternatives. So, for example, as an alternative that we're exploring, this is not definitive, but might students who are getting dropped off at Cheshire High School have the option of getting dropped off? It's escaping me, the next street over where the funeral home is. Might they get dropped off? Yeah, thank you. A walking path to Cheshire High School, as opposed to having all those cars pull around front. I mean, we're looking at different options with the Cheshire Police to make sure it's safe and to make things more efficient in our buildings. What about leveraging volunteerism to fill gaps? Absolutely. When we send out our survey, we'll be asking for parents who may be interested in supervising buses. You will have to pass a background check to do that, or to come and help supervise at recess or something like that, where we need more eyes on people and supporting social distancing. That would be really helpful, and we are going to ask for that. Have we thought about moving to outdoor classrooms? Yes, I talked about the tents. There aren't enough tents in Connecticut for us to move a lot outdoors, but we do want to provide more options for that. if there's an issue in a school or class and plans shift to learning models in a more localized way. So if there's an example at the high school, for instance, would a decision move to hybrid or virtual be made only for that school? Actually, in a cohorting model, we try to only do it for that group in the most limited degree, that the people that the individual has been in close contact with. So elementary and middle, that's why it's easier to have that cohorting. At the high school now, if it's an alternating group, that gives us some cohorting capacity, but not great. We would still work with only those that the child came in contact with, but all the kids that are going on the other day, if there's no positive in that group, we have no problem. Would we consider a modified hybrid model for younger students that has them engaging in class more regularly? So after we issued the hybrid model, the Monday, Tuesday with the Wednesday off, Thursday, Friday, is we explore the youngest grades. We think that there may be room to continue to discuss and explore with medical advice. Is it possible to get the younger kids in still on a daily basis? And that's going to, it's going to depend on data and medical advice, but we're certainly open to that idea. There were a few emails. We had 4 emails from different people, 2 of whom were married, that were concerned about pushing the start of the calendar back. And we'll talk about that a little bit later on. Will teachers be provided details of building specifics before making final decisions about returning based on their medical conditions? We're trying to provide everybody more detailed information about their return. Things like the state changing what's permitted obviously derail that for a short period, and we're trying to get as much detail out as we can. But please know, even when we send out videos about what a day in the school will look like, we're still trying to finalize those. We'll probably still be finalizing those till the bitter end, which is why, we anticipate providing the first 2 weeks real flexibility about changing your mind, going from remote to school or vice versa. After that, we'd like you to really lock it in for a period of a month, and then have a kind of an open enrollment period at the end of that month. So that's kind of where we're at the moment. Have you seen recent data on children under age 10 being transmitters and contracting COVID? All the data we have to date is very positive around the younger age groups. But again, this is so fluid. It changes seemingly daily, and we continue to monitor that, as well as take guidance from the health professionals and Chairperson, including Chairperson, I should say, around what's appropriate. I want to just take a second to shout out our pediatrician, Jim O'Connor, who is always available to talk to us about concerns and questions we have, always very responsive in getting us feedback. And he regularly, as part of his professional development, is working with Yale and is often the conduit for many of our questions that we have to go past a body of experts in the field of epidemiology and transmission and illness, and he gives us back great feedback. So thank you, Jim, for that. Will teachers be provided an option to teach remotely? That's already something I addressed. If there's an illness, that is something we would certainly consider most. But if it's just I don't feel comfortable, we would work with that individual to try and make them feel more comfortable. But unfortunately, we may not be able to accommodate every one of those requests. Will there be a new survey sent out to parents? I've kind of covered that, and to teachers. We're going to send out an email, a survey that says, which one are you committing to? That's really where we're at this point in the game. We have to be able to make plans for the return to school. So parents can expect that, again, next Wednesday.
Chuck, one quick question on that commitment
Sure.
one. I just saw a couple come through on my end. So is when we ask parents for a final commitment or final say on where they land when sending our kids to school or not, does that bind them into that option? Can they make the
It does.
changes?
It does in some respects, but again, for the first 2 weeks, we'll be flexible in letting people in and out of that.
Okay.
After those first 2 weeks, we really need to kind of lock that down for continuity, for the children's sake, and for our staff. And so, you know, we would look at that point for at least a month commitment in either way.
Okay.
Now, obviously, if the state changes and says, you know, 3 weeks in, everybody goes remote, then everybody goes remote. But, you know, in terms of the choice, that's what we're doing. This is a really lengthy email that I can't read the whole thing, but basically it's a advocacy for district choice, for hybrid model, and it looks like this person's pushing for that being a consideration at all grade levels. Again, we'll consider, you know, with the data and our medical advice if we do that. This next one is that Dr. Solon indicated at a previous meeting that one classroom in each grade will be wired for synchronous teaching. Is that one classroom enough? And again, I think, you know, when we get data back about how many people want to go out, at that point we'll be further along in the installation process and maybe even able to pursue more if that's prudent. If 50% of parents are driving their kid to school, how will we manage the start of school? The individual principals will talk a little bit about arrival dismissal, but I've already talked about us working with CPD to support that process. And I'm really appreciative of Lieutenant Jeff Sutherland to offer us his support on that. What about an individual student testing positive and the students that they may have been in contact with before, during, after school? So if there's a positive, it doesn't matter if it's a child in our community, our schools, or an adult in our community. Maura Esposito and her team at Chairperson actively pursue contact tracing for those individuals. So the challenge here is that a positive test can take 10 days to get back. And, you know, tell me everybody you've come in contact with over the last 10 days. For some people, that's easier than others. And, you know, so it's created a bit of a challenge for Maura and her team.
Jeff, I'm sorry to interrupt you on that one. That's one that comes up regularly. So I think the context of one of those really questions is if my son or daughter is in the classroom, you know, during the course of school, and it turns out that one of the students in the classroom contracted COVID, what's the procedure for the rest of the classroom? Is the classroom quarantined? Do the parents get notification that there was an exposure? Do they go off and get kids tested? And related to this is, will the schools force testing on kids? I know we can't and wouldn't.
Right.
But I think it's more about what happens when the child, because it's going to happen. I think we plan for the worst, hope for the best, right?
Yep.
But if it happens in the classroom, the concern is what's the protocol then for the classroom, the kids impacted, the teachers?
Right.
Is the answer to follow Chairperson CDC guidelines, or how's? Do we know yet?
So we're working with Chairperson and surrounding towns to develop common guidance around that. Chairperson had initially said, well, we need to assess the situation. Is this a student who never wore a mask and has been playing basketball and with all the buddies in the neighborhood? Well, now those buddies may need to be quarantined, and individuals that those kids sit next to, did they wear the mask all the time? Would they have to be quarantined? We would work with Chairperson to notify everybody who needed to be notified. If there's a positive in the building, we'll notify the building community that there was a positive test, not by name in that, but that there's an individual in that building. Now, if it's a child in a specific class, we're more than likely going to cohort, or, you know, in that cohort, the middle and elementary schools, that class might very well likely be quarantined, but we're still working through the details of that. And I think Maura, and justifiably so, is sensitive to, hard and fast in the sense that, well, you said that only the kids from the class would be quarantined. Well, that's not true. The kids in the class might be quarantined. So are the 5 kids that this guy's been playing basketball with outside every day for the last 3 weeks with no masks on. And so those kids would also, and maybe some of the other kids in their classes would have to. That's the absolute worst case scenario that we hope doesn't happen, and why we need to reinforce how critical masks are with kids and adults in our community. If we go with a hybrid model, are we consulting with other towns? This comes from a parent who's a teacher in another district. The answer there is yes, we've been working closely with other surrounding towns on that. And I feel bad that I keep just hitting these through, but I want to honor the time that these people put into asking questions. And it also gives perspective to everybody who's in the audience about the diversity of things that we're trying to work through. Person saying, I think the proposed changes to the school calendar are great, especially starting later in September. About why the last possible date for kids would be June 17th. What happens if there's a blizzard or weather-related event? And we'll talk a little bit about that. And that's really, we're going to go to remote learning after the second snow day. So after that second snow day has occurred, every snow day thereafter would be a remote learning day. And that's somewhat contingent upon what happens with the school calendar discussion later, but that's the plan at this point. Okay, I just want to get back to the start of these questions here. Sorry. All right. Backpacks instead of lockers. We are requiring backpacks instead of lockers. That we don't want kids congregating together closely. That may change as we get to winter and have to worry about coats and things like that. But at this point, no locker use. What will lunch be at the high school? That'll be addressed by the high school plan. We will not be cutting any elective courses in the music program. We really want to, for those large ensemble classes, get them outside as much as possible where they can play musical instruments, where they can sing. As I said before, for some kids, that's the reason that they come to school every day. And I really want to make sure that we continue that. And our team is committed to that. Questions about safety drills, fire, and lockdown. Still waiting for guidance from the state on that issue. It seems to fly in the face of the health guidance to have everybody congregated together. So we're waiting on that. A question about being a substitute and how will that process work? We've just signed a contract with Kelly Services where they will provide us significantly more access to a larger pool of staff should we need it. Now, I think not only might we need it for teacher subs if worst case scenarios, but also for additional IA support and to provide supervision. If we don't have adequate numbers of volunteers, we'll need to do that. Will subs be able to participate in COVID training before school starts? I think that's a good idea. We'll work with Marlene to try and get that off the ground. Question about will there still be freshman orientation? We're going to address that in the calendar conversation in a little bit. Well, this is somebody who's just giving me a shout out for the leadership stuff and how things have been going. One concern relative to reopening with the increase in COVID cases among 10 to 19-year-olds, how can we responsibly open schools? Knowing a significant portion of students made the leading demographic for recent infections. We are working still very closely with our medical personnel, and we are so far away in some respects from the opening of schools that we will continue to monitor that very closely and follow the guidance of our health professionals. Like I said, Maura Esposito, namely, and then also with with Jim O'Connor and others that we consult on these issues. This is from a teacher who happens to live in town with a concern about the potential for the new hybrid model and the concern for extra prep time being needed. I think that's something that we'll work through with the high school administration and teachers there to continue to work on that. That's something that we're very sensitive to. As I said earlier, the worst thing that we can do is burn out our staff. That results in bad, diminished instruction for our students. And so that doesn't work for any of us. We need to work collaboratively to make sure we have positive experiences for everybody. Can we use AC, air conditioning, and will the heating systems be able to run while the students are in school? I know heating may sound crazy after the last week and a half that we've had, because it feels like the earth is on fire at this moment, but it will be here before we know it. Quickly though, with the AC, we can't use window units. We can use central air systems. We've purchased upgraded filters for those, are in the process of trying to secure those for the start of school. It's called a MERV rating. We currently use a MERV 8. We're looking to go to MERV 13, which is recommended, and we will do that. We had another question about working with optimizing airflow and things like that. We have been consulting with a mechanical engineer to optimize all of the airflow that we have, as well as with a physician from Yale who's helped us with some of this as well. And we are implementing that for our schools. I am conscious of the fact, by the way, that without air conditioning, it could be super hot in it's hot, in our buildings now. And so what we're looking to do is consider half days if the temperature is going to be that hot, or even a remote learning day, asking our students to spend the day and staff in the day for the full day in the school with the mask on when it's 90 degrees in the room is overwhelming. And you would know that if you've been outside for more than 10 minutes with your mask on in the last week and a half. How will students be able to wear masks in schools opening August 27th when there's no air conditioning? Will portable units be deployed? Unfortunately, we can't use the portable units. They simply recirculate the air, so those are forbidden. And so we are looking at pushing the start back a bit. What's the plan to screen all adults, etc.? Temperature checks, required tests. We don't have required testing. As a matter of fact, we did explore, if you saw last meeting, batch testing or pool testing, it's called, where it's a simple nose swab and not the deep nasal swab, but it's a nose swab where, say, 25 people put their swabs into a container. The lab tests those and can pretty quickly turn them around. The problem is there are so many false negatives with that process. It's not been perfected yet. And so we kind of abandoned that strategy. The other thing is doing the real deep nasal swab, the tests that you most see on TV. Those take so long to turn around that they're not really an effective manner to screen. So we ask people, certainly our staff and students, to take COVID screeners at home. We're providing the Kinsa thermometers. They're smart thermometers for families in Cheshire to be able to take their own temperature before they come to school. That data is then provided to anonymously to the state, where our Chairperson can track this and see, well, geez, we have more fevers at home, and it's going to take this entire thing to wipe out COVID. Takes an incredible amount of personal responsibility from all members of our community, as I've been harping on masks, temperatures as well. If you're feeling the symptoms, stay home. We want to try and provide you with instruction at home to the greatest extent we can. Not if you're at home for one day. We don't do that now. We don't automatically hook you up. But if you're home for multiple days and you're quarantining or something, we want to try our best to get you the best education you can during that period, especially if you're not ill. Is anybody exempt from wearing a mask? If a student, staff, or visitor is exempt from wearing a mask, how will those individuals be screened for COVID-19? Everybody really has to wear a mask. I mean, that's the bottom line. It's a public safety issue. If we do have some individuals with significant needs who may not be wearing a mask, and we are providing additional PPE for those unique situations. But really, masks are necessary for everybody. Are you talking about high school only remote? Yes. Then they reference a survey, a statewide survey about teachers not wanting to return. I think there's some validity to that. I think there's real concerns that our teachers have, and we're working with them to address those concerns. Elementary school question: if only one elementary school classroom per grade is equipped with synchronous learning at this point, will parent-teacher ratio be maintained? And yes, so we know that if we were to put every student who's remote plus 20 other students in a class with a teacher, that would be a terrible situation for the teacher and the students in the room. So we are maintaining the class size ratios. I think Tony made a good point about, will parents know how many students are in rooms? It's kind of a chicken and the egg situation where I don't know exactly how many kids will be in a room until I know exactly how many kids will be going remote. So I won't know in advance, but I can project out for people, and that might be helpful. This is a statement about the governor indicating 6 feet distancing with a mask, 12 feet without. That's not the guidance that was presented in the state document. So, we're following the state document to maximize social distancing to the greatest extent possible. I'm sorry, this email is it's really long.
Well, Jeff, give you a short break.
Yeah.
So, take a drink. First of all, thank you for going through all this. So I just want to make a couple of comments. I know for folks watching or who may be brave and actually watch us after the fact for its entirety, because this can be a long meeting. Thank you. I know there's a lot of information everyone's looking for. I would encourage the central office, or I say Jeff in this case, that all these questions that we're getting and all the answers, if we can put them out there in the FAQ and just keep it going and get folks to see that, so I'm hopeful. I don't know if it's possible. I know there's a tremendous amount of work going on in central office, but maybe before the next meeting, if there's a way to get the FAQ updated with all these questions and answers and points made. Yeah, it's a running list.
Yeah. So
before the next meeting, it may help folks, kind of tune in the middle of the meeting and say, oh, they're not really answering the question. We kind of answered it an hour and a half ago, and having to watch the whole video. I mean, I don't want to watch myself for the whole video. I'm sure people don't mind watching you through the whole video, Jeff, but it's a lot to absorb, and having that document to work with is key. So the point is, let's update that site as soon as we can. I'm happy to help if I can, but I know it's not that simple. So hopefully I brought you a few things to.
Yeah. Thank you. And we are trying to maintain that and continue to update that. It does need to be updated, particularly after the number of questions we received today. So we'll work on that as well.
You want to break here in questions, maybe go on to the next section and come back to the questions?
I'm okay cranking them out if you are. I'm
fine. If the board feels otherwise, speak up. I also worry about the folks watching.
Yeah. I mean, it is tough. I mean, it is tough to go through all of them. I know people want to hear an answer to their question, which, we're trying our best to get through them. But obviously, there are a lot of questions, and it gives a sense of, these 100 questions or whatever. It's reflective of the amount of planning and challenges that we have to overcome to open schools effectively and safely. So, getting back real quick, athletics, there's a question about that. As I said, that CIAC is going to work on that. Question about, has the board seen the CEA survey that was released yesterday? I'll be honest, I haven't had a chance to read it. It basically says statewide, I think it was like the 48% of teachers don't want to come back. They're concerned. I don't want to say don't want to come back. I think they're concerned about coming back is a better choice of words. But I don't know if any board member wants to address that. Go ahead.
Yeah, this is really a reminder of, because I've heard from parents, and I know I mentioned it before. I think Marlene has spoken to it. A reminder I've heard from parents who want the classroom to be set at a specific time. This is probably more, it might be remote learning for the high school. The thing that I just want people to keep in mind is, of the 400 teachers plus staff that are involved, everybody has their own story. And one of the things that goes through my mind is caregivers, not just necessarily childcare, but also, senior care or care for anyone really. But life can be complicated. And if we end up in a situation where we were before, where teachers are teaching remotely from home, being able to get to the camera at a given moment in time can be difficult. And maybe it's not appropriate, this is a new year, and maybe that person should not be teaching because of that situation. But I want to add my own personal experience, as some people probably saw before. I've got a preschooler. This is just one small example. Preschool, I think it was 20 kids basically per class. And Jeff, you might be able to speak to it. I know you have relationships with the preschools, but it's dropped down per the state rules right now. I think it's dropped down to 14 kids per class. So simply even finding preschool, even if a teacher wants to, could be complicated. So I just want to remind people that the teaching remotely is complicated because everyone is bringing their home with them. And I know we all sort of know that now. We've been doing it for a few months, those of us fortunate enough to have a job. But I think it's just important to keep the complexities in mind of life for everyone.
Yeah.
Jeff, on the CEA survey, I did see, in fact, some of the board chairs were talking about earlier today. I mean, just rough numbers. So, based on the CE survey of United Teachers, it finds that about 81% of teachers expected they be back in the classroom. So there's expectations that, they will be back. But given the choice of being in the classroom, online, or a mix of both, being in the classroom, the survey indicated 16% of the teachers would prefer that. 46% wanted to go online. So, and as you noted earlier, it's not that they don't want to be back. It's more about safety concerns. And you mentioned earlier on the call that you are meeting with the local teachers union. And I think you've been talking to them anyway. It's up to you if you want to go into that, but I know you're going to be talking to them in further detail about some of the concerns they have locally, but you've also been meeting with the teachers. You said about 75 so far into this week, and it'll be more. So be curious if the sentiments of that survey across the state are different than what you're hearing, especially based on the things you're trying to ensure our teachers do feel safe if they do go back to the classroom. But those were the high level numbers from the survey.
Thank you. Yeah. The next one was, if a student is quarantined, would they be able to do remote learning? It's easiest if a class is quarantined, that teacher and students would do remote learning like we did last spring. If it's an individual from a different class, it would take us a little bit more time to set that up, but we would definitely want that individual who's home to have access to their education, particularly if they're not sick. I mean, that's the worst case for a parent, that your child's not sick, but they're home. And, we want to make sure that they continue to be educated, particularly if it's such a long stretch, these 14-day quarantines. The question about, are we going to send out another survey? It felt like the last survey was misleading. That survey was a survey from the state that we were required to send out that asked where people were. Now the next survey that goes out is going to be, here's more information about what school will look like and which one would you like to commit to. In the CPS plan, it states students that choose to participate in remote will be placed in classes that support synchronous learning. At the elementary level, does this mean that students will be placed in a cohort that has the synchronous technology in the room, and if the child later decided to return in person, they'd be added to that same cohort? To a degree. So we would make every effort to place students that are designated as remote learners in that synchronous environment. However, there are other variables that may trump that. And so, we rely on the principal's discretion there to make those decisions that are in the best interest of the student. And yes, I mean, that if you do come back in that situation, you would stay in that cohort with that same teacher. Another question about how many teachers are not coming back. How are we dealing with the union? I think we kind of touched upon these issues. And I don't have detailed information yet. Just like for students, I don't know exactly how many are not coming back yet. Question or concern about, yes, CHS is larger, but keeping kids socially distant in elementary schools near impossible. This person is basically concerned about not allowing hybrid at the elementary level. Again, this is something that we consult with physicians on in our health team, and we make decisions that are in the best interest of all students, and we are providing an option for those that don't feel that that's appropriate for them. Concerns about teachers you've heard and how you're addressing them. I've kind of addressed that already, that I'm meeting with large groups of teachers. I very much value the opinions and perspectives of our teachers, and they've been very helpful, the meetings that we've had, for them to express concerns to us, because we try and rectify them the best we can, including things like, I don't know what I'm going to do with 6 days of professional development for childcare. So we're looking at options for that. Not that we're going to pay for childcare for our staff, but how do we make it available and how do we make it easier? And so that's what we're looking at. Masks, this person saying still unclear when kids need to wear them. You need to wear them all the time, unless you're outside of the 6-foot social distancing. Unless you're eating, playing an instrument where you have adequate social distancing, you should be wearing the mask all the time, unless it's a mask break. Plan for transportation. It's a good question. Right, Vin, you want to talk about transportation, just to break up my voice?
Okay, well, I mean, we're going to run the transportation the way we normally do, except that we're trying to have a maximum capacity per bus of 50 students. The normal capacity, depending on the bus, we have some 70 passenger or 80 passenger buses. So, 50% is the high that we're setting our routes to. And then to the extent that, parents are not sending their children, there would be less than 50 students on the bus. So, I mean, that's the plan across the district. I'm sorry, Jeff, there's not much more of a longer answer than that. So
No, I don't need a long answer. We're looking for short answers these days. This would be a good thing. Thank you. Next question is about a hotline to report concerns about safety and non-compliance. I think it's a great idea. We could definitely set that up for the start of school. Just forwarding on that email so we can address that. Sorry. Weekly testing. I've already covered that. Outdoor schooling as much as possible, we've covered. Reduced density where kids go a couple days a week. That we've addressed through the high school level, where it's currently most supported by our medical team. If students decide to go this talks about that same question before. If you're remote or not remote, do you stay in the same cohort? Answer is yes. If you are starting in school and you go remote, however, you will probably receive some live instruction from the person who's doing synchronous. Your teacher will be responsible. Your teacher of record will be that homeroom teacher. If you come back, you're going back to that teacher you were assigned to. And you will be getting all your work, your grades, everything from that teacher you were assigned to. I want people to understand, like, we're used to the normal. And I could give you a lot of data and give you a lot of examples that, we do normal school better than pretty much everybody in Connecticut. Over the last 4 years, we've skyrocketed in our ability, and our performance and everything. This is not normal school. Even when kids come back to school, seating in rows, all facing the same direction, it's not normal school. I still think that we will do the best that can be done under these circumstances, but things aren't going to be normal. So the idea of being in one class and possibly getting some live instruction from another teacher is not normal. And it's just weird to think about. It's hard for our teachers to consider. It's hard for our parents to swallow, but these are certainly not normal circumstances, and we're doing the best we can, and we'll learn more and we'll continue to evolve. But that's really the challenges that we're dealing with at this time. Will there be option for non-synchronous learning like we had in the spring? I think that's something that we're still trying to work toward, recognizing that not all parents are available, and maybe perhaps students aren't capable of logging on, at that time. So particularly with younger grades. So that is something we're working toward. Just a shout out, for trying to answer 1,000 questions. Can you describe any changes in the plan for Dodd since the last meeting, including how you reduced the cohorts from 100 to 25? And it's a good question, Sid. And honestly, right now, I don't have enough detail on that plan. Mike Woods, the principal there, will be sending out information on what those cohorts will look like by Wednesday. And at that point, I think you'll have a lot more clarity. And I know Mike will be able to answer that question better than I can. So I apologize. I don't have that one off the top of my head. Will you be having dry runs for the new technology? Yeah, we are installing that right now. We actually want to have another meeting in one of those locations so people can see that. It's really quite impressive. So why not hybrid for Dodd? Again, we're working with our guidance of our health team and consultants to make that determination. And this is an absolutely fluid situation. So I could be sitting here telling you a hybrid's appropriate for Cheshire High School today, and come back 3 weeks from now and go, hybrid's appropriate for the whole district, or we could be saying we have to close the whole district, or everybody goes back full time. We all want to go back full time. We all want to be safe. We all want our kids to be safe. And we're working with the health guidance. And I know with 4,200 different students, there are going to be a lot of different parent perspectives about this. So we're trying, with the guidance of health professionals, with our talented teacher team and administrators, to provide a really strong option that captures everybody, as many people as we can in the center, knowing that some people on either end may not be happy, and we want to try and provide options for those folks. Regarding the notion of a positive case, it will be shared within that school building. But what about siblings? It's a consideration, something that we'll talk to Maura in the health department about. Kids driving themselves to school and with others. I mean, that's been a real concern from a variety of folks, including our teaching staff, about when the school day ends. It's disheartening even now to drive through the community and see a whole bunch of kids together, not wearing masks and stuff. And so it's obviously impossible for us to police that. And it's really got to be a community commitment to be vigilant about wearing masks, when you're around those that you don't live with. As it says, as of now, is the state accepting hybrid proposals? We have to submit a hybrid proposal, but that is not yet, something that they've allowed to happen. Will we continue with the YMCA program? Yes, we are working with them. They have a great team, Chrissy Cassisi, her team. They've been great with us, and we're going to continue to work with them for after school at this point. Again, if numbers change, that may change, but that's where they are right now. We are asking students to put their masks in Ziploc bags if they're capable. If not, we understand that. Again, if a mask gets dirty, we have additional masks for students in all schools. Hybrid model at CHS where classes don't have a camera speaker option. That right now is if we go to the different hybrid plan, we would have to worry about that than just our opening hybrid plan at this point. Right now, we're focused on that. Twins should likely be cohorted in the same class. I know that's something that we really give parents the option of for twins. And so at this point, we really unfortunately can't give much of an option there to maintain cohorting. So yes, they should be in the same class. So this is a great question about what sort of manipulatives are provided for students in, say, an engineering class or more like a science biology lab. We're working through professional development to try and identify like home options for like labs. So what materials could we use at home to replicate this? Alternatively, do we need to put kits together that families can pick up like we did during the spring so that the children at home can get the best possible experience without being in the room? So this also impacts us with labs that we typically do in pairs and things like that. So we are trying to be considerate of that. How are kids going to play wind instruments without spreading germs? Marching band going to be an option. During band performances, we don't have distancing. So traditional band performances will likely not take place as we've known them in the past. That being said, we're still working with Mr. Kuhner to provide marching band, pep band with the social distancing that's required in order to facilitate that. So those large ensembles, we want to get those kids outside because I know how critical it is to them to actually be outside and be engaging in that. So our board will be very happy to know that I have reached the end of our COVID questions and this ordeal for you is now ended. I hope that there is some education in there for not only our board, but certainly all the members of our community.
Well, your ordeal isn't quite over. Adam has a question, but in jest, of course, Adam. Jeff, the majority's questions come in during the meeting.
Yes.
Yeah, I was going to say, I know in an ideal situation, if they came in ahead of time, and there was a way to write them up and post them somewhere so we can refer to them in the meeting, but I know it's not always that easy. And I suspect during the next meeting, I'll yield to Adam in a second. At the next meeting, I think you alluded to this earlier, that sometime next week you look into the board to put our approval on a plan. Is that correct?
Well, we've already submitted the plan that we were required to submit. Today, what we're looking for is approval on the calendar. the plan is going to be something that even if you approved it today would probably be different 3 days from now, would be different 5 days from then. So there's not a formal approval process for the plan, but meetings like this help us, keep communication open about what's going on.
Yeah, that's where I was going. So it might be worthwhile to have another meeting next week, even though that things are a little bit in flux, just so we can keep answering the questions. And if there's any change in information or options that come up, it might be easier to try to do it in small chunks to answer all these questions versus waiting 2 or 3 weeks out for another meeting. But we can certainly talk about that. I'm sure after today, if folks will certainly watch this video, you'll probably get more emails.
Yeah.
But I do thank you for going through all that. And
Yeah, I want to make sure Mr. Massiana is available next Wednesday because our viewership goes through the roof when he's on, and I just want to.
Well, we were at 221 earlier. I don't know if that's gone
Yeah.
up or down since you started talking. No offense, but well, sorry, sorry.
That's right.
Long days, Ann, I'm sorry. You've been waiting for a question for about a half hour, so please go ahead.
Thank you. Actually, it was developed through the listening to the questions that were submitted by parents. In regards to the synchronous learning, it sounded like we have a self-imposed cap on who can participate. And if I did interpret that correctly, does that mean that parents who choose early to have their kids be schooled remotely, would they then get a preferential treatment or a preference to be in the synchronous learning as opposed to a pure remote learning situation? Or is the intention to be purely synchronous at the beginning of the year for those who decide to opt out?
So it's a fair question. I think what we do is, regardless of when the request comes in, we evaluate the requests and the needs of the student. And we trust the principals to make really good decisions about what is the best learning environment for this student. And that, is often made with, feedback from the parent or the teacher that they had last year, any sort of needs that the child may have. Not that those are used to rule people out. If you have special education, there's just a good chance that you'd be in a synchronous learning is not. But what are the individual's needs? How can we best meet those needs? We want to try and honor that, synchronous learning request. But in some cases, as you heard in the questions, we may get asynchronous requests for kids that are out. So, in that case, we're going to be judicious about who we place in those classrooms, making sure it's in the best interest of the student.
So then we are sort of self-limiting the access to the synchronous learning.
Based on the original data, Adam, there just aren't enough kids in any grade or school based on the original survey that would exceed the number of kids we would have in a classroom anyway. That may change. I'm very conscious of that. It may change. In that case, we'd probably be looking to add more synchronous learning capacity. But right now, it wouldn't exceed. So we're not limiting it yet. We may have to make that determination in a couple of weeks.
Okay. And then as far as YMCA goes, as for before and after care, and I don't know if they share data via to you directly or if they have to go through Chairperson. But if before school begins, would they be sharing with you their data from their summer camps as far as if anything occurred there?
Yeah, to my knowledge, right now they have 550 kids not wearing masks, cohorted, predominantly outside without issue. Now, I mean, that's different than, being inside, but these are kids that are going home to families every day, coming back. And it's, for me, that's positive information. And I really hope that will continue with kids once school starts. But yeah, we would definitely be in communication about, any sort of positive test or any sort of issues that they may be carrying over from the summer. As of right now, I'm not aware of any, and we communicate regularly. But yeah, it's a good question.
Right. Well, because I know that once before and after care begin at the elementary level, any kind of restriction that they may have during the day, I don't know if it'll necessarily carry over before or after care. And are they required to tell if there were any incidences? I don't know if they take temperature or anything like that, but if they say someone came in the afternoon with a fever, are they required to report to your office that day if something occurred like that for the next day?
Yeah, we would make a condition of their use of the facility to report any concerns. I mean, in some respects, it may be an early screener for somebody who comes into before care. I mean, I certainly am not advocating, geez, if you're not sure if your child is sick, why don't you just send them to the Y and they'll figure it out? You know, obviously, if you're not sure if your child is sick, if it's a question in your mind, they have to stay home, period, end of story. And let the school know, and we'll work with you to try and support your child and your family the best we can. But we will maintain close communication with the Y. We have that already, and that will only be closer this year.
That's good to know. And lastly, for teachers who don't feel comfortable in returning, does their union give them any sort of like a sabbatical option where they basically risk a full year off, but not endangering their career if
Sure.
they bet that COVID will be solved for next year, and so they're just
Right,
going to
yeah.
take the year off? Is that something that they can do, or is that
Yeah.
something at the
Yeah.
university level?
Yeah, no, that would be possible here as well, that if a teacher asked for a leave of absence, we'd be likely to grant that. Again, every situation is so unique and specific to the individual, that if they have questions and including that, they should reach out to our HR department who can help them. I know the unions asked them to reach out to them too, and that's good, because we work closely with the union as well. So, we want to try and support each other because we need them desperately for our kids to be successful, and they need us as much for our support. And it's a symbiotic relationship.
No doubt. Thank you.
Okay, before we move on to the next update, Tim had a question earlier.
Thanks, Tony. Yeah, so maybe I don't follow the news closely enough, Jeff. So everyone may already know the answer to this, but you had said before there's a 10-day delay for test results.
Yeah, it's running about that long. Yes.
Look, coincidentally, I had surgery about a month ago, and I drove down to St. Rafe's and I got the jump in the pool, deep dive COVID test, and they had the results in a few hours. So I'm wondering, is the state, I mean, I'm not talking about you, but is the state looking to put something like that on their bid where we could actually get the results, get the test done? You'd have to hire nurses, the equipment, but
Sure. What I've heard is, and I'm not a public health specialist, so Maura could give us the best answer on this, but my understanding is that the supplies are in such incredible demand from the states that are overwhelming that it's been hard for us to get local supplies. There are limited locations in Connecticut where one can get a turnaround test, where you just unfortunately, I had to do that about a month ago, and the Gateway location was open in New Haven, and my wife and I found out in a matter of an hour that we were negative in the whole process, which is what we would want in a best case scenario across the country, really. Unfortunately, that availability just doesn't exist in Connecticut. So when you go to your doctor and you do the typical process, Maura has shared publicly she had to be tested for COVID. It was 10 days before she got her results. She's the public health director. I mean, it doesn't give us a lot of confidence for people who aren't the public health director.
thank you. And one other thing, and I don't know if you're going to speak to this separately, but it was on the graduation is in a couple days.
Graduation is on August 2nd. How exciting.
Okay, yeah, if you're going to bring it up later, that's fine. I just wanted to ask about that briefly.
Yeah, I mean, I could tell you that we were very hopeful that the way things were trending, we would have the opportunity to have a more traditional in-person ceremony. Unfortunately, it won't be that way, but each graduate can bring a car with their family to the Farmington Polo Grounds on Sunday afternoon, and the information is available through the Cheshire High School site, and we will be live streaming it, and it should be an unorthodox but memorable event for all of our graduates.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. Jeff, did you want to or Vincent, we got a financial update? Do you think you covered that as part of your?
Yeah, I think Vin covered that.
Okay.
Anything you need to add, Vin?
How about medical claims? Any changes this month?
No update to medical claims yet. I should have a report probably in the next week, though.
Thank you, Vincent. We have no old business, but we do have new business. So we have approval of a revised 2020-21 school calendar. But Jeff or Marlene, you want to give us the overview of what the options are and how you came to this?
Sure. So I'm going to share my screen really quick, and this is information that we floated to the community last week and asked for some feedback on. And like I said, we did get the handful of folks pushing for a later start, and we had a handful of folks pushing for the earliest start possible. So in sharing my screen with you here, this is proposed version A. It looks a lot like our start of school now. This is our current start of school, the 24th, 25th, and 26th of August. 27th, 28th, and 31st would be the mandated days for the state professional development. So our school year would start on September 1st. I just want to hit each one really quick and point out some of the differences, and then we'll get to what my recommendation would be. This is a similar calendar where we start the RPD, state PD. The next 3 days would be what we're calling an orientation, like a hybrid orientation model, where we would have approximately a third of the students in each school attend those days. There's no additional cost for this from a busing perspective or anything. We would run regular bus routes. We would pick up a third of the kids based on their alphabetical last name. We would bring those kids into school and run an orientation program with them, given the idea that the mask thing will be different for them. We have to run them through mask breaks. Transitions to a new school with transportation will be different for obviously our kindergartners, our first graders at Doolittle, our seventh graders at Dodd, and our ninth graders at Cheshire High, who'd never received the benefit of transition programs last year. All students would also have the benefit of a more intimate day with their teacher, just a small group of students in the class getting to know their teachers, which we found to be really the most critical part of remote learning when we got there, was the relationship between the student and teacher. We figured that would be a very good way to kick it off. This, by the way, that 3-day rollover was unanimously endorsed by everybody on the stakeholder committee that looked at how do we return to school. The last option, version C, we start our teacher professional development days a little bit later. the 27th, 28th, and 31st. We then have our state professional development days, the 3 days leading up to the Labor Day weekend. The orientation days are the 8th, 9th, and 10th, and full start on the 11th. Now, this option here is the one that I would most endorse because, as I said earlier, the governor still hasn't told us if a hybrid plan would be allowed or not at any level, including the high school, although they have said that the high school would be the area they'd be focused on. If I don't find that out until the middle of August, which is the current plan, our ability to adapt and provide, a quality experience for our kids is going to be really compromised the earlier that we start. And can we do anything? We turned around from brick and mortar to remote learning in 2 days. But, if we're looking at what's in our students' best interest, I think that having that additional few days would be beneficial from the planning perspective. The other reality that a lot of folks have expressed, I've said in this meeting several times, that we're not permitted to have air conditioning. Now, could it be 90 degrees on September 9th and not on the 27th of August or something? Yeah, of course. But we're looking at probabilities in a situation where the 8th, 9th, and 10th, we have a third of the kids in the building. It provides greater options for mask breaks, kids to be able to just go outside if it is a hotter day. And the 11th would be then all students in or engaging in remote learning that day. Even for students that are doing remote learning, the teachers in the classroom and other kids in the class will be connecting with each other at this part of the alphabet these days as well. Because we're not forgetting about the kids that are home and just tending to those who attend school, but those students would also be a critical part of these transition days for our students. So the goal would be to start all students on the 11th. If I had a secondary option, it would be the B plan, where the transition days occur before the Labor Day weekend and we start full on the 8th. So I want to just throw it out for discussion.
Jeff, just a quick observation. I think Tim brought up before the meeting started that on options B and A, the calendar shows in June 9th being the last day for students, but in the listing it shows June 14th.
Okay. Yeah. This is accurate. This here is accurate. So the last day for students in option A and B would be the 9th. And I'm glad you brought that up, because in option C, the last day shifts to the 14th. Now, in that option, what we've said is that for the first 2 snow days, so the 15th and the 16th, it would push the calendar back. They would be traditional snow days. If we were to have a blizzard or something like that, once we got to the 3rd snow day, not in one weather event, but throughout the course of the winter, the 3rd snow day and each snow day thereafter would be a remote learning day. So on those remote learning days, they would count as our school days. And so we could guarantee that the last day of school for our students would be the 17th.
Ann has a question, then Catherine. And I just want to share that my daughter doesn't like the idea of snow day being remote learning day. But
well, the first two, she can have a great time. I'm sure she likes the idea of summer vacation though. So
I heard a squeal from the kitchen, so Ann and then Catherine.
Yeah, I actually, just to go off of what you were just saying, maybe in the future, that's a way we can handle snow days, even if we have this online learning, remote learning capabilities. If we get it down, really get it down to the science that it is, we might be able to use that in the future.
Yeah, some people live for the snow day. I remember as a principal, even as a superintendent, like the snow day is a blessing from God because I could come into work and catch up on all the things I hadn't been able to catch up on. And, you know, for kids, they may not feel that way. They like, you know, my son would like be excited about Fortnite or Roblox for my other guy, you know, it's like, but they get 2 of those days, and then after that, we get back on track so we don't burn up more summer.
My only comment was that I had when I looked over those 3 scenarios was I really, really like the 3 days of student orientation. And I accept, Jeff, your explanation of why you might want to start later. But to me, the main issue was having those 3 student orientation days. I thought that's a great idea.
Yeah, so that's available in B and C.
Right. That's all I have.
Thank you.
I think I'm next, right, Tony? So Jeff, I just had a quick question on C. So the last day of school would be the 14th. If the 3 snow days that that the intent would be to do remote learning, if something happened that prevented remote learning from occurring, that I guess would push the last day of school out another day past the 17th, right?
So some sort of
If you
act
had
of
3
God,
snow days.
like a tornado that
Well,
knocked
the
out
big
power.
power outage, you know,
Power lines
like,
down.
yeah, something like that. So, you know, but only if we couldn't do the remote. I'm sorry,
You know, like
but I
the
like
odds
it.
of that happening are a 110% in 2020.
I
That
know.
a meteor
Yeah.
on the 3rd day of school is going to take out all the communications in Cheshire.
Yeah.
And
I
that,
know.
so as much as I hate you for bringing that up, you're probably right. And so we would have to explore that. I will put an asterisk on the calendar.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry.
Cataclysmic act of God may extend the school year.
That's it. That's all I had. Thanks.
Thank you.
But
Good point.
I do support the C as well. It just seems to make more sense to me to push out the start so that we avoid a lot of heat days, you know? So I think that's a really good idea.
I will say our administrative team at the meeting today begged me to advocate for C, because, like I said, the nuances of what we're planning for the start of school, to even buy them those few extra days at the start, and then the heat are 2 real considerations from our staff as well. They're very concerned about students and their own, you know, well-being in the heat. Now, again, I mean, we could, if we didn't start on that C schedule, we could still play the, you know, remote learning day due to heat. So that's still out there, but doesn't preclude us from not being in that day.
Right, but it does give you more time to handle the last minute change that the governor's going to throw at us, basically.
Correct.
So
And that's a real issue for us.
that's really a huge thing. Yep. Thank you.
Tim, and then
Hey, thank you, Tony. Yeah, my real comment was what Catherine had just touched on about power outages or whatever scenario might happen and avoiding guarantees on the last day of school. And the only other thing I'll point out is Snowy Day, one of the best children's books ever. Snow days are important for some of these guys.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
thanks, Tim. Adam, you're up.
Thank you. So, God forbid we had to go back to full remote learning. I think one of the godsends was that you were able to basically shorten the year to, I think it was June 1st, if I recall, or okay, unofficially June 1st, and then it was like
Yeah, yeah,
so is that that would be the plan with Plan C, would be if something like that occurred, perhaps we'd all get a reprieve as of June 1st and then hope for the best.
yeah.
Is that the
Yeah.
thought?
Well, the bottom line for this entire year is flexibility. And, if God forbid we ended up in an extended period of remote learning to close out the school year again, I think there was a tremendous amount of positive feedback from our parents and students and staff around, having that first week of June be a closeout of anything, assignments, work kids needed support with. And then we did need an extraordinary period of time under the circumstances for return of materials. So we would probably pursue that again if indeed it came to that.
And lastly, regardless of whichever calendar we choose this evening, um, is there any consideration of teaching outside? Because at least what you've seen so far, fingers crossed, is that when the kids are all outside at the summer camp, it seems like when they're all distancing and cohorting, that it seems like it's successful, at least on the elementary level.
Sure.
Is that a consideration until the summer breaks, at the end of September?
Yeah.
Or and if it is, why would we not consider perhaps the B model instead, where at least you're getting a few days um, more of potential good weather than bad weather when you move into October?
Sure. So absolutely, that's why we're pursuing the tent options. And so we want teachers to have the flexibility to go outside any time that they determine that that's what their class needs. And when it's appropriate, obviously, instructionally, and it makes sense for the kids and developmentally, so many different considerations, but we want teachers to have that flexibility. You could, as I said before, consider the B model. I don't know that, do we need the time more up front versus, toward the end? I think we probably need the time more up front to adjust than we do in October. And that's just the rationale there. As to why our team really preferred that C model, is being in the best interest of our students.
Thanks.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you. I lost track here, but I believe Adam's up next. No, you're good, Adam. So I think option C gives the most flexibility for not so much the heat, because I'm going to be Tony Downer and say that if it's hot, in August, end of August, it may be hot. Like you said, it could happen. Yes, most likely, we'll see. But I think it gives a few more days for you and your team, Jeff, to adjust to any last minute changes from the state. And last minute could be literally a week before reopening or 2 weeks before. You still need time to adjust, as we're saying. So I like the idea. Also, I think the fact that there's 3 days for our students to have orientation and get acclimated to the new reality that they're going to be working with, whether it's in schools or at home or hybrid, I think is key, because it's going to perhaps lessen the adjustment period for them to get used to how we're going to move. So I support that option. The last question I had is, I know with the professional development for teachers of 3 days that was recently passed down as guidance from the State Department of Ed, it lessened the mandatory school days from 180 days to 177. Do we have to meet the 177 school days?
Yeah.
Yes, at this point, yes.
Yep.
So unless there's further guidance throughout the school year where we've seen this past school year, that is the number at this point. So that being said, if that doesn't change and we do have snow days that we can't do remote learning, then we can see an extension of the last day of school. But beyond that, I personally support version C. Before we ask for a motion, does anyone else have any questions or comments on the 3 options provided?
I just want to add that there's no more public comment. Either nobody's submitted additional public comment.
Faith has a comment.
Not much of one. I mean, if you want to hear from all of us, I agree with what Tony just said. We saw that the governor can change his mind on a dime. You could get 2 days. It may not even be 2 weeks. And I think you need as much time as you can to adjust. And I think option C gives it to you. And we're all in the middle of global warming, so there isn't going to be a winter. And so Adam, don't worry, you're going to be outside in January. But I think I think C is the best option.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm option C. I mean, as I said before, without having a final date from the state to receive guidance, we as a district need the time to plan, the parents the time to plan, having those orientation days built into the schedule with third occupancy, so teachers get the routine, everyone gets to know what the routine is going to be. I think that makes the most sense.
So that being said, does someone have a motion? We literally need to fill in the blank with the version. Catherine.
I'll make the motion. Okay, I got to read it off the agenda. I move that the Cheshire Board of Education approve the revised 2020-2021 school calendar marked as version C.
Thank you, Catherine. Is there a second? Adam, I gotta be honest with you, I flipped between tabs, so I wasn't sure if Ann put her hand up first or Adam. So I saw Adam first.
It's all good with me.
Adam seconds, and the motion is move the Cheshire Board of Education approve revised 2020-21 school calendar marked as version C. Is there any discussion from the board or any further discussion? Tim.
Yeah. Sorry if I missed it, but do we have continued flexibility throughout the year based on current executive orders or?
Well, that's an important note that things could change again with flexibility at any minute. And right now, it's been outlined, we would be able to count those 3 orientation days as our student days. It'd be a flexibility, but again, 2 weeks from now, the governor may put the kibosh on it. So I would put a caveat that the 8th of September could be a first student day for all, and we wouldn't be able to do those orientation days. We are exploring other contingencies for kids if we're not able to do that, but there's no question that the days as we've just outlined are in the best interest of our students. I just hope that the governor allows us to keep that.
When does the current executive order end? Beginning of September?
Yes.
Okay. And so he may re-up that, but we don't know at this point.
Right. Like, for example, the 180-day reduction to 177 hasn't been issued through executive order, and nor has the law been changed. So technically, it's kind of just a declaration hanging out there. It's not legally binding yet until he issues another executive order, or I guess the legislature could change it, but I don't know that that's going to happen.
Sure. Okay. We all just have to be open-minded about it this year.
Flexibility is the key.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
I feel like if we're any more flexible, we're playing
We're Gumby. We're Gumby flexible.
That's more for obviously our parents and teachers being very flexible around this too. Any public comment on the motion? And I was just texted for Jeff to please check his email again.
Okay, I just had one come in at 9:07.
I don't know if it's related to the motion or not, but we can
No,
certainly
it's
go
not.
back to the mail bucket after
It's
this.
actually one individual talking about what they would like to do for their child for the first month of school. So that's the only email I have on the COVID or direct email. Okay, I just got 2 more. Can this be a parent vote? At this point, I think we need to move forward, and doesn't meet the needs of all parents. Again, we've had some that wanted to do it. So it has been out there for several days now, and I received a total of less than 10 emails in either direction. And we do have to tell our parents at some point, like, this schedule needs to change. The sooner that we do that, the better we are, and we'll support them in, with their kids and everything in that process. We're one of many districts, including Southington, Meriden, and Wallingford, also looking to move their start day after the Labor Day weekend.
Thank you. Barring any additional comment, I'll read the motion one more time. Move that the Cheshire Board of Education approve the revised 2020-2021 school calendar marked as version C. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
It is unanimous. The motion passes. Thank you. As far as the chairperson's update, very briefly, I think I communicated this to the board yesterday, just through an FY email. So after the governor's comments on Monday about the hybrid option for the largest schools, high schools, just so folks watching understand, I know there's a lot of information out there. I'm thankful that Governor Lamont put this out there, that he's considering that option. Commissioner Cardona also seems to agree with it, but, and I think Jeff alluded to earlier, he has not received official guidance from the State Department of Education that is the option been approved. So the point is, we're hopeful that it will be an option. So what the governor says, until the State Department of Education actually publishes guidance to the school districts, in this case Jeff, we can't immediately act upon it. So what the board chairs have done through CABE, the Connecticut Association of Boards, yesterday was ask that the commissioner get clarity in writing, essentially the guideline. If that is the case, please write it down and submit it to school districts ASAP so we can solidify these plans, and also ask CABE's legal counsel, Patrice McCarthy, to clarify that as well. So we expect to receive something concrete soon, but it does not mean that Superintendent Solon is waiting for an official confirmation. He obviously can't pull trigger, so to speak, but I know the team is planning on a hybrid option. We just need confirmation from the state. I know people see the news, the government says this, why aren't we doing it? That's one of the reasons why. So it's not just us, it's every school district, just, again, following rules. I don't think I had anything else. Just a quick update for the board. Earlier this evening, we met with the teachers union to set ground rules, guidelines for negotiations. We are starting the next 4-year contract negotiation with our local teachers union. So we set dates and so forth before the meeting, which is great. We said moving forward. But beyond that, I don't have anything else. And given that we're going on 3 hours and 15 minutes, I'm going to end my update there. Before I adjourn, is that call for a motion to go into executive session? Do we have, Jeff, any last minute communications we want to address, or is that pretty much it?
Well, I got 2 emails saying they wanted to adopt Schedule C. So I don't know if those were the ones, but they got their way, I guess.
Well, let's see how things play out. We'll see how flexible we are with that schedule.
Yeah.
That being said, I do have a motion. I move the Cheshire Board of Education. I move that the Cheshire Board of Education adjourn into executive session to discuss union negotiation with optional optionally having Marlene Solano, Vincent Massiana attend because they are part of that discussion with no action to follow. Is there a second? Ann seconds. All those in favor? Thank you. We will be adjourning the executive session to discuss collective bargaining negotiations. There will be no action to follow. So for those of you watching, please don't wait around for us to come back because there'll be nothing to discuss. For those of you that have tuned in, whether through the whole meeting or parts thereof, thank you very much on behalf of all of us. We thank you for your time and patience. I know there's a lot of information shared tonight. Superintendent Solon is going to update the FAQ on the site. If you feel that your question has been answered or gotten to, I would say let's give Jeff and his team a few days to catch up on emails. But certainly reach out to any of us. I do want to thank, on behalf of all the board members, I know all of us have been in contact with many folks out there, parents, teachers, other stakeholders. We are getting your feedback. We are sharing it. So thank you for that. Keep it coming. That being said, we're going to executive session, and Mike, let us know when we're able to have that discussion.